Hey guys, it's Poppy, and today I'm going to be talking about the big lessons that I learned while I was writing my first draft. And these are kind of some of the pitfalls I think that you can stumble into along the way as you're writing your first draft. So I'm doing this, yes, to reflect, but I'm also doing this as kind of like a, hey, I made it through, let me tell you what to watch out for. So here we go, you guys. Okay, the first lesson that I learned is that it is okay if you don't have everything figured out before you start. I think a big reason why I struggled to start my first draft is because I really thought that as a writer, I had to have every single detail figured out before I started. And that just simply wasn't true. And really, it's almost kind of impossible to some degree. Now, before I started writing, I did have an outline that I wrote. So I had a really good idea of where my story was going before I started. But I did not have everything figured out. In fact, there were some major plot points that I had no idea how I was going to resolve, including my ending. Like, literally in my outline for my ending, there was one line, and that was it. That was all I knew of. I want this to happen, but I have no idea how it's gonna happen. But something amazing happened when I started to write. As I was writing, all of a sudden, like, plot holes started to fill themselves, and like characters that maybe started out really shallow started to fill out. And halfway through my book, I came up with my ending. So the real key to this point is don't let the fact that you don't know every single detail stop you. I let that stop me for so long and was shocked when I found out along the way that, hey, some of these questions are starting to really kind of answer themselves. So don't let that stop you. Okay, the next lesson I learned is that there is no editing while you write your first draft. No editing. None. None at all. Stop it. I think this is one of the biggest lessons that I learned while I was writing my first draft, and it really freed me and really allowed me to just write with wild abandon. This lesson is really all about moving forward at all times, because if you give yourself the chance to look back, then you will be tempted to edit. Editing has its time and place. Editing comes when you're done with your first draft. One note I want to make about this point is that it is okay, for example, to go back and read a little bit of what you've written the day before to kind of help you ease yourself back into a scene. It's not okay to finish a chapter or a scene and then go back to the beginning of that and reread the entire thing. You're just really kind of inviting temptation. And again, like I said, once you get tempted to edit, you start editing, you slow your process down, you get bogged down in editing, it gets frustrating, and you want to quit. So don't do it. Be moving forward. Okay, the next lesson I learned is that your first draft is not going to be perfect. The sooner you accept that and move on, the better it will be for you. Just trust me there, people. In fact, I think every day before you start writing, you get up, you go stand in the mirror, you look yourself square in the eye, and you say, my first draft is not going to be perfect, and that's okay. My first draft is not going to be perfect, and that's okay. My first draft is not gonna be perfect, and that's okay. Say it until you mean it, people. A first draft is all about making mistakes, and while you're making mistakes, maybe discovering new things. It's freeing, and it allows you to take risks, and I love that about it. So keep reminding yourself, keep saying it in the mirror. It's okay that my first draft is not going to be perfect. Okay, the next lesson I learned is that my inner editor cannot always be trusted. So I'd say about a month before I finished my first draft, I had this writing day that was just horrible. Like, I just had one of those days that was just crappy, and I just felt like everything I was writing was wrong, and I had written this kind of important scene, and I just felt like I had taken it in the wrong direction, and when I ended that day, it was just not with good feelings. Now, if I had listened to my inner editor that day, I would have basically erased everything that I'd written, and I would have started fresh the next day. But because I have the rule about no erasing anything, I didn't do that. Now, what happened was, the next day when I went to write, I reread the last page that I'd written so I could really kind of just ease myself into the scene and can kind of continue on that day. And the amazing thing is that it was really good. So it was like, I was reading it and it was like, oh my gosh, this is really good. Like, what was wrong with me yesterday? This is perfect. It just shows you, you know, like, not at all times is your inner editor right. And I think it was because I was having a bad writing day that day and I just was kind of done. And if I had listened to that voice, I would have missed out on this great scene that I wrote that probably will stay 90% the way it is, and I would have erased it and lost that all. That is a huge lesson to learn, is that your inner editor cannot always be trusted. That leads me right into the next lesson, which is that it's probably not as bad as you think it is. I learned that all throughout writing my first draft. I would have a day where I would write something and think it's not so great. And honestly, now that I'm reading through my first draft, I'm realizing like a lot of the things that I thought were horrible are not as bad as I thought they were. When you think it's bad, that's what makes you want to stop. You know, when you kind of give into those feelings of what I'm writing is bad, what I'm writing is not good, that makes you want to stop and fix it, or that just makes you want to quit. So keep reminding yourself, it's probably not as bad as I think it is. I just need to keep pressing on and do that. The last lesson I learned is that I could actually write a book. That if I didn't stop and if I kept going, that I could do it. And I have done it. I finally have finished the first draft of this book that I've been wanting to write for years. And it's done. So I pass that on to you. You can do it too. There's a great quote by a writer named Richard Bach that says, "A professional writer is an amateur who didn't quit." It's all about not stopping and pressing forward. As I was writing my first draft, there were definitely moments where I could hear the voices of doubt in my head. You know, the voices that are telling me, like, why are you doing this? Do you really think you can do this? Have you lost your mind? Because when you look at the process of writing a book, I mean, it's a huge undertaking. So, of course, you know, there are going to be moments when you doubt yourself. But I really think, you know, the thing that quiets those voices of doubt is writing. So when you hear those voices, you write, and the more you write, just, you know, the quieter those voices will get. So don't stop, keep going. It can be done. If I can do it. Poppy Williams, who has a problem finishing lots of things. I'm a good starter, but I'm not always a good finisher. If I can finish, then so can you. So just keep going, don't stop. So I hope that the lessons that I learned can be helpful to you in your writing journey. Thanks so much for watching, you guys. Don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you again soon. Bye.